The Venice Biennale is one of the most prestigious cultural institutions in the world. Held every 2 years, the Biennale is an international exhibition of art that sees almost every nation represented. And as a result, it's sometimes known as the Olympics of the art world. It runs from May to November and attracts up to 500,000 visitors who come to explore some of the best contemporary art from all over the world. I'm here to explore the British contribution to this year's Biennale. I'll be meeting some of the artists and curators involved and encountering some extraordinary art. I'll explore the British artists showing in the main part of the Biennale, as well as the so-called collateral events that can be seen all over Venice. From the Scottish Pavilion in the Palazzo Fontana to the unexpected sight of a crazy golf course on a Venetian waterfront. But I'm starting here in the Giardini, the heart of the Biennale, home to the original national pavilions and in effect where it all began. Since 1895, the Venice Biennale has invited countries from all over the world to present the work of a single artist or a group of artists. To be selected is highly prestigious, and for many artists, it's the high point of their career. This year, the artist in the British Pavilion is Sarah Lucas, so I'm going inside to meet the curator and take a look around. Sarah Lucas is an artist who came to prominence as part of the so-called YBAs, the young British artists who transformed the British art scene, and then the international one, in the early 1990s. Her work is often known for being provocative, irreverent, and incorporating aspects of British popular culture. Since 1938, the British Pavilion at Venice has been managed by the British Council, and this year it's been curated by Richard Riley. Richard, why was Sarah Lucas chosen to represent Britain now?
Sarah is of that generation, obviously known as the YBAs, who in the last 25 years have really made a massive impact on British and international art. And I think it's always a committee who selects the artists for the British Pavilion. And the committee was reminded how good she is by the fact that she's had a series of very significant exhibitions in the last 2-3 years. So it was as though we hadn't seen much of Sarah for a little while. She'd seemed to have laid low, not had many exhibitions. And then suddenly there was this burst of activity. And it just reminded everyone how good she is, how strong she is.
It feels very familiar, but it's subtly and significantly different as well. I mean, she's playing on familiar parts of her own work, but it's all bound together by this yellow colour.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Yellow, the unifying yellow. Yellow is always featured in her works because we think of Sarah Lucas and fried eggs in particular. She had talked about the John Soane's Museum. There is a yellow, there's a unifying yellow in one of the galleries.
This classicism to a certain extent.
There is, and of course these are neoclassical galleries. This building, the British Pavilion, was built in 1887. So she came and she did think about the classicism of this space and how she was going to work with the galleries.
Still bawdy and still provocative,
yeah.
or is that not possible when you're 50?
No, I think there's still an irreverence there. And she is dealing with, the sexuality and gender that she always has. And a lot of her classic Sarah Lucas vocabulary is there: cigarettes, tabloid newspapers, spam, tins of spam. There is quite a lot of furniture. Of course, a toilet appears in it, which is another Sarah Lucas standard. But it is primarily a sculpture show.
So an installation of objects rather than a show of installation?
Yes, she has made a series of sculptures which she has created an overall installation. But she's following in this great British tradition of sculpture in the modern era from 1948, Henry Moore, Barbara Hepworth, Chadwick, Armitage, Paolozzi, then Caro, Cragg and Kapoor, and then Rachel Whiteread. So she is in this kind of fantastic tradition of British sculpture.
Richard Riley, thank you. The British involvement in the Venice Biennale doesn't stop at the National Pavilion. The national exhibitions at Venice are complemented by a single large-scale exhibition in the Central Pavilion and the Arsenale, focused around a major theme. This year's exhibition is curated by the Nigerian-born curator Ofili and is called All the World's Futures. This Biennale is much more than just an exhibition of objects and installations. Instead, Ofili is trying to bring together the most diverse range of creative people possible in order to explore not just the appearance of things, but the state of things. In other words, the complexities and problems of an increasingly globalised world. There are 10 British artists showing as part of the All the World's Futures exhibition. This is beautiful, sensuous. It's a kind of secular chapel or a chapel of nature. It's a new body of paintings by Ofili in an installed space also by Ofili. And actually I'm seeing quite an interesting shift. Ofili's work has referenced many aspects of British culture, a kind of Pan-African culture, the Caribbean on occasion, but I'm also seeing Eastern influence here, and also perhaps a nod to turn-of-the-century Vienna. Sonia Boyce has her work, Exquisite Cacophony, showing in the Arsenale. The film captures two performance artists collaborating in an entirely improvised exchange at the V&A in London. It's a work that examines the fluidity of language and communication, and something of the nature of spontaneous social interaction. And humour, of course.
I don't know what that is. Curatoriac? I don't have an MFA, guys. I can't understand what that word is. I can't fit it inside my rhymes. I was raised and educated in Florida and I don't even know what that means. Please, explain what curatoriac is, see?
Sonia, how did Exquisite Cacophony come into being? What was the process?
Well, I've been wanting to work with Elaine Michener, who's a sound performer, for about a year, and I've been chasing her for a year. And then last summer I came across astronautalis Andy performing in Germany. They didn't know each other.
You just knew that there was something in the way they performed that was going to work?
Andy, he has a kind of pop career. He's a kind of grunge rapper. And I really thought that that style of making sound would work quite well with Elaine, because she comes from a very kind of semi-improv kind of background. And I was really interested in what that clash, the clash of those two different styles might produce.
How much control are you trying to exert, and how easy is it to let go totally if you bring these two people together with an audience at the V&A? You just let it go and see what happens.
You just let it go. You've got to let it go and see what happens. I mean, that's the very nature of the project. And the very nature of what I do is I work with people in a very improvised way. There's a kind of loose framework. We know it's going to happen at that time in that space. We had enough cameras around to make sure that we caught something. In a way, that's the challenge. That's the exciting bit. It's to not know what's coming ahead. And that's part and parcel of improvisation, that you don't, you kind of have trust in whatever the process is.
How is it for you now seeing the finished piece in the context of this particular Biennale? How does it resonate for you?
Oh, it's just, I mean, I feel really very, very honoured actually to be part of all of this. I think that of the work that I've seen so far, I really love that mixture of aesthetics and politics and questioning and things that are coming at you in a way that you really have to think about how does this fit together. And for me, that is what's exciting about being part of all of this, because I feel at home, but also quite honoured to be part of it.
Sonia, thank you.
Thank you.
In the space behind me is a very powerful work from the British artist and filmmaker Steve McQueen. Back in 2002, McQueen was filming on the island of Grenada and shot some footage of a young fisherman called Ashes sitting on a boat looking out at sea. The footage wasn't used in the work he was making, but a decade or so later, McQueen rediscovered the footage and decided he wanted to go back to Grenada to find out more of the life story of the young man. And when he got there, what he discovered formed the basis of the second part of his film installation. It turned out that Ashes had discovered a package of drugs on a beach. He'd taken it and got involved with gangsters and smugglers who in the end murdered him. And what McQueen does is interweave this story. It's a kind of narrative archaeology to a certain extent, but also with the process of making Ashes' grave. So the whole thing becomes an act of commemoration that actually uses the process of creating a memorial, and it's bound beautifully together in a work that I think is incredibly powerful and strong. Another artist showing in the main exhibition is the occupant of the British Pavilion at the last Biennale, Jeremy Deller. Jeremy, you were in the British Pavilion 2 years ago. Is this a kind of follow-up?
No. This was not. This was what I was doing directly after Venice 2 years ago. I put together a big exhibition about the Industrial Revolution, and this is a little excerpt from it, basically.
So let's unpick this installation.
Yes.
The broadside blues, or the broadside
Yes.
songs. These are industrial songs.
Well, they're songs that were sold in the street in cities, So it's a new form of music, popular music, and they're sort of folk songs.
Late 19th century, mid 19th century?
Mid 19th century. They're folk songs, but they're actually really urban folk and industrial folk. So it's more what I would call popular culture or pop music.
Is there a culture of nostalgia involved in this and what you're doing with it?
I would say there's no nostalgia, because there's a section called the shit old days. I don't know if you remember, there used to be a programme called The Good Old Days, which was this sort of very romantic view of Victorian Britain, everyone's singing songs together in music halls, but this is actually the reality of what it was like. And so there's a series of photographs of women in Wales, South Wales in the 1860s, working in ironworks, and it shows the sort of toughness of them and toughness of their lives. So it's not sentimental in any way. I hope it's not sentimental. And then on the, we have a jukebox. It's called Factory Records, and it's just sounds of factories that have been recorded over the last 20, 30 years. Most of the mills closed in the 70s, and a lot of these recordings were made then. And weirdly enough, the archive that collected them all just closed last year. So actually, that's gone as well. So archives are going, and the factories are going, ironically. But it's a very straightforward explication, really, about also my interest in music, the culture of music and its relationship to the Industrial Revolution.
The British Council also supports independent exhibitions at the Art Biennale from Wales and Scotland. These are staged across Venice and are not part of the official national pavilions, but are classed by the Biennale Foundation as collateral exhibitions. Other collateral events from the UK include the work of Ursula von Rydingsvard, whose meticulously assembled monolithic structures on the edge of the main Giardini are presented by the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Unofficial events such as Mick Jones' Rock and Roll Public Library springs directly from the enormous personal archive of Clash guitarist Mick Jones, an endlessly evolving collection that began well before the band was formed in 1976. And Doug Fishbone's Leisureland Golf, presented by EM15, a fully playable artist-designed miniature golf course in which 9 artists have been commissioned to design a golf hole each, exploring a range of contemporary concerns, both real and imagined. This Venice Biennale reaffirms the status of British art in an international art world, but it also, I think, shows that British artists in all sorts of different ways are capable of taking part in significant and serious international cultural conversations in ways that are profound, poetic, sometimes humorous, but always significant. So all in all, a successful Biennale for British artists. Oh! Just more than can be said for me.